Yo, welcome back to the room, Soul Fam. This is Season 2, Episode 20 of Max and Mello's Architects of Soul. And I'm Max Soul, your lead composer and chief engineer.
And I'm Mello Soul, your head of operations and vocal specialist.
Yee!
We're back on the tracking floor to dismantle the blueprints, the foundations, and the heavy structural lifting behind the music that shapes our creative universe.
Today, family, we're tracking a woman who wasn't just a singer. This woman was a certified general contractor of sophistication. We are deconstructing the architect of class herself, Miss Roberta Flack, the woman who taught the entire world how to handle absolute high-pressure vocal intensity while keeping the arrangement at a whispering cinematic crawl.
Man, talk about a deep load-bearing foundation, Max. When upcoming artists look at the landscape of modern R&B and progressive soul today, they're seeing a space that Roberta completely zoned. But the way this master builder got constructed started long before the multi-platinum towers or the back-to-back Grammy legends. It starts with a severe working-class classical blueprint right in Arlington, Virginia.
That's right, Mello. But first, it begins at 4 in Tennessee with that little girl named Roberta desperately dreaming of playing piano. Because her family was of humble means and couldn't afford an instrument, little Roberta used her imagination, and she would literally sit around their house in the Blue Ridge Mountains and tap, tap, tap out tunes on the windowsills, tabletops, and furniture, mapping out the music entirely in her head.
Exactly, Max. Roberta's parents noticed her innate promise because she would also sit on her mother's lap at church and effortlessly pick out the complex gospel hymns by ear, singing with her beautiful young voice.
Yes, by the time Roberta was 9, the family moved to Arlington, Virginia. And Roberta, well, she was still dreaming of her own piano. But her family couldn't afford a pristine instrument straight out of a showroom gallery, and her father, Lawrence Flack, who was an industrious draftsman, went scouting through junkyards and secondhand lots looking. Well, one day he was walking home from work, and he spotted an old, ratty, weather-worn, and completely faded upright piano sitting in a junkyard. Man, he went in there and asked the owner if he could have it. And the man said, "You could take it for free." Well, Mello, her dad took that bad boy home, painstakingly repaired it, tuned it, and painted it a vibrant grassy green. You gotta love that.
Yeah, he did, Max. And in her own words, Roberta was so excited that she couldn't wait for the paint to dry.
Bet.
The moment it was ready, she sat down and began practicing relentlessly for hours a day, teaching herself songs straight off the radio and the church pews. Young Roberta cleaned up those battered keys and used them to anchor her classical foundation, practicing her scales for hours every single day. Think about that structural grit for a second, Soul Fam. That raw determination that turned her into a legitimate child prodigy.
No doubt, Mello, no doubt. Roberta's formal classical piano training truly took off after that green piano arrived. And nobody had to push that little girl to practice. No. She had a dream. Her dream and her ambition was to become a world-class classical concert pianist, playing Bach and Chopin and Scarlatti. And the moment her elite prodigy status became an undeniable fact on the public record was when she was just 13. She entered a highly competitive statewide classical piano contest for black students and won a second-place honors executing a complex Scarlatti sonata.
That single high-level performance, Max, was so flawless that it instantly won her a full music scholarship to Howard University. A full ride
No
at
joke.
13 years old.
No joke. That is
13,
no joke.
which of course led to her parents actually making her wait a couple of years until she
You
turned
think?
15. Oh, yeah, because 13 was too young. But
Oh, yeah.
once she turned 15, she was able to enroll. But her path as an absolute prodigy was permanently locked into the architectural framework of soul and classical history.
Making her one of the youngest architecture students ever to enroll in their music department. Well, off she goes to Howard with her dream and her piano, right? There she goes, ready to conquer the world of classical music. However, not so fast,
yeah.
no. So when Roberta was pursuing her undergraduate degree, her ultimate dream, as we said before, was still to be a concert pianist, a world-class concert pianist. She thought that that's the way it was going to be for her. But the dean at Howard, he sat her down and delivered a heavy reality check about the music business and zoning laws of the late 50s. And we know all about the 50s. We've talked about it endlessly. The dean warned her that the mainstream classical world was intensely cutthroat and deeply segregated, like who knew, right? Making it impossible, or nearly impossible, for a black female classical pianist to get booked or earn a sustainable living. And he explicitly advised Roberta to get her specifications stamped in the music education program so she would always have an unshakable financial foundation. Brilliant
Exactly,
advice.
man.
Absolutely brilliant advice.
Yeah, and in taking that advice, Roberta graduated with her bachelor's degree in music education at just 19 years old and immediately went straight into graduate studies at Howard to keep leveling up her academic credentials. Then, the ultimate structural crisis hit the job site and the bottom fell out. Her father passed away suddenly, and the family was left facing an immediate crushing economic deficit. Roberta had to drop her graduate studies completely and find a paycheck to support herself and help her family survive. Luckily, a college friend from Howard stepped up and helped her secure a job teaching English and music at H.B. Suggs School, a small segregated school down in Farmville, North Carolina.
Can you imagine, Mello? She was only 19 years old, teaching kids who were practically her own age, making a meager $2,800 a year. I mean, really? Mm-hmm. But she treated that classroom like a high-fidelity laboratory, she did. Oh, man. She introduced those students to everything from classical melodies to heavy spirituals, and her school choirs completely dominated, winning every single competition that they entered.
She surely did dominate, Max. Roberta later proudly stated that the very first time she ever felt true success wasn't in a Hollywood recording studio, but inside that Farmville classroom, and after a year of saving money in North Carolina, she migrated back to Washington, D.C. to teach in the public schools. She went straight to work as a classroom general contractor, teaching music and English at D.C.'s junior high schools.
And that deep master-level literacy in choral arrangement and music theory, well, became the load-bearing pillar for her entire recording philosophy later on. And this is exactly when the dual shift grind was activated. The daytime teaching job was her financial anchor, her shield against poverty, her way to pay the bills while she spent her nights playing in clubs, refining her voice, and waiting for the industry to finally catch up to her blueprint.
And that meant pulling a brutal 14-hour dual shift lifestyle, Max. She was managing rowdy classrooms by day and then immediately shifting onto her night shift down at Capitol Hill Club called Mr. Henry's, and then competing in classical spaces as a young black woman in the 1950s.
Right, navigating that classical space while holding down a teaching job was an intense high-stakes battle, too, against the rigid zoning laws of the 50s and the 60s. Man, Roberta, she didn't just play the piano. She pretty much had to engineer a completely unique parallel track to survive the institutional racism of the era. Mm-hmm. So when Roberta entered classical piano competitions or performed in traditional concert halls, well, the social zoning laws were stacked heavily against her. As a young black woman, she routinely had to enter through the back door of performance venues and face judges who openly discounted her style and technique simply because of her race. And you know what, Mello?
What?
Well, she navigated this by refusing to let them see her sweat or shake in her alignment. Fuck them, right? Atta girl, take no shit. Well, so fam, she doubled down on a flawless execution strategy. And Roberta played with such undeniable, pristine, military-grade precision that the judges literally could no longer deny her entry or her high marks. Man, she had weaponized her classical training to force them to look past their prejudices.
And Max, because the elite mainstream classical concert world remained heavily segregated and made it nearly impossible for a black female pianist to secure a premier booking or make a living, Roberta used her teaching position as a workaround.
And here again, she took advantage of all the advanced knowledge of European orchestration, Bach, Chopin, and channeled it directly into her junior high school choirs. Just like in Farmville, right? But here, she wasn't just anchored to one location. She was mobile, teaching choir and music across 3 specific junior high schools: Brown Junior High, Rabot Junior High, and Banneker Junior High School.
And at Rabot Junior High, she was actually known to her students as Mrs. Novasil, Max.
Who knew?
I'm picturing like a Mrs. Doubtfire type.
Right.
You know, only black.
Doubtfire.
Yeah, and because she was married to the prominent local jazz bassist Steve Novasil at the time. Anyway, Max, she ran those inner city classrooms with absolute military-grade discipline and high-fidelity standards.
Damn straight.
She forced her junior high vocal students to rehearse their harmonies over and over until their execution was mathematically flawless, completely bypassing sloppy habits. And this DC...
Sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah, really. Well, that D.C. public school run is exactly what collided with her discovery. She would clock out from running choral arrangements for junior high kids at 3 p.m., then head home to give private piano lessons on Euclid Street to make extra cash, and then pack her gear to hit the stage at Mr. Henry's or the Tivoli Theater for the night shift.
Yeah, teaching wasn't a side hustle she was half-assing, Soul Fam. Her deep background as a certified choral and conductor is the exact reason why she knew how to meticulously layer her own background vocals and track harmonies with frame-accurate precision later on at Atlantic Records. Man, she was a teacher at heart, and she used the classroom to perfect that blueprint. She taught her students how to stack vocal harmonies with classical precision. By turning her segregated classrooms into high-fidelity vocal laboratories, well, her student choirs completely dominated the state circuits, winning every single trophy on the board, just like she did down in Farmville. She found a loophole to express her classical genius when the standard concert halls shut her out. And ultimately, navigating the brick wall of the classical piano world is what forced her into the ultimate career rezoning. She started singing. Mm-hmm. Roberta was originally just strictly a pianist. She didn't consider herself a vocalist. But as she began playing lounge gigs to supplement her teaching salary, well, she realized that combining her sweeping, spacious classical piano arrangements with an intimate, whispering vocal style, hey, that was a blueprint for an industry that had never seen anything like it.
Mm-hmm, that's right, Soul Fam. Roberta Flack bypassed the segregated classical gatekeepers entirely.
Damn straight.
Yeah, by creating a brand new lane, symphonic soul.
Holla.
By the time she landed her legendary residency at Mr. Henry's, she was using her classical mastery to reframe popular music, slowing down pop and folk songs to an unquantized operatic crawl. And when the classical world wouldn't give her a seat at the table, she simply built a brand new skyscraper that she owned 100% of the deed to.
Oh, yeah, but she didn't let those systemic barriers shake her alignment, Mello. She let her flawless execution do the talking until the industry could no longer deny her entry. Up at Mr. Henry's, she refined the ultimate performance specification, the ability to hold a raucous late-night bar crowd completely spellbound with nothing but that whispering piano ballad. She was acting as her own booking agent, stage manager, and musical director.
She surely was, Max. Roberta Flack built the frame from the ground up, Soul Fam. And that's the opening lesson for every up-and-coming artist trying to make it in today's music scene. You have to master your craft in the dark before you can ever stand under the stadium lights. Drop your thoughts on the feedback floor, fam, because we're throwing to our first break.
That's right. You're listening to Max and Mello's Architects of Soul, and we'll be right back.
Stick around. Welcome back to the Job Site Soul family. We're stepping back onto the tracking floor for segment 2.
And before we dive deeper into the Roberta Flack matrix, if you like this content, please give a like and subscribe to our channel. And remember, there is a video version available on our YouTube page if you feel like watching instead of just listening. And if you have a moment, we'd love it if you checked out our music, which is also on our YouTube page. All right, so Mello, when we last left Roberta at the end of the last segment, she was teaching by day and working at Mr. Henry's at night and making some noise.
Oh, yeah, right, Max. You know, I used to play Mr. Henry's.
That's right.
Many a wonderful performance there. As a matter of fact, what they did at Mr. Henry's was if you did the open mic night, which was every Tuesday, and the audience reacted well to that, they would book you for other nights.
There you go.
Eventually, me and my friend Tracy G, the legendary Tracy G, got our weekly night there at Mr. Henry's. And Gene Carn had been there, the main act on the weekends. And then after that, Julia Nixon was the main act on the weekends. But it was Mr. Henry's was that kind of place where a lot of people got their start. Donny Hathaway also.
That's very
early
cool.
On. Yeah.
Absolutely amazing experience for both you and Roberta, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
So, Soul Fam, let's talk about Mr. Henry's for a second. So it seems Henry Yaffe, who is the owner of Mr. Henry's, brought Roberta into the venue framework in 1968 to hold down the stage 5 nights a week, 3 sets a night. Which, of course, she probably did a open night too, just like you did, and then ended up getting a gig. Yeah. So word had spread heavily across the local music scene. The local tracking meters were redlining. And Roberta was officially the new girl everyone in town was talking about. Mm-hmm. And why, Mello? Why? Because Roberta was such a badass that she wasn't just drawing neighborhood crowds at Mr. Henry's.
No, Max, she surely wasn't making a small splash. She had built such a regional, intense reputation that A-list entertainers, musicians, and comedians who were in town performing their own marquee shows.
Yeah, pretty much anyone who was anyone.
Exactly. They would deliberately head down to Capitol Hill late at night just to witness her sets. Icons like Woody Allen, Bill Cosby, Ramsey Lewis, Carmen McRae, and Johnny Mathis were already sliding into those church pews upstairs at Mr. Henry's to audit and ingest her performance layout. And she was killing it.
She surely was, Mello. So Roberta gets booked to perform at a benefit concert held at the legendary Bohemian Caverns for the Inner City Ghetto Children's Library Fund. And because it was a major community benefit, the room was packed with elite cultural figures, including Les McCann. And for those of you who don't recognize the name, Les McCann was a powerhouse jazz pianist, vocalist, and an absolute founding member of soul jazz. Emerging in the late 1950s and dominating the 60s and the 70s, Les McCann rejected the overly academic cold jazz formats of his era. He injected raw, heavy elements of R&B, traditional black gospel, and deep pocket funk straight into the jazz piano frame, essentially helping mother the entire soul jazz movement. He is best known for his absolutely smoking legendary multi-platinum 1969 live album with saxophonist Eddie Harris, a badass record called Swiss Movement, which was recorded at the Montreux Jazz Fest. And that record, well, it featured his iconic, explosive anti-Vietnam War protest single Compared to What? Which is a motherfucking killer. Killer. Which became a massive generational crossover smash. Seriously, we love Massive. You must be realizing that by now. Anyway, it was a monstrous song, though.
And because his rhythmic pocket and Fender Rhodes electric piano grooves were so mathematically perfect, his catalog became an absolute goldmine for modern music production. His tracks have been sampled, looped, and flipped by hundreds of hip-hop and R&B legends, including Dr. Dre, Notorious B.I.G., Snoop Dogg, and Pete Rock.
Badass.
Yeah, so here's Roberta taking the stage to play. She stepped up to the piano, completely untruncated her vocal power, and delivered a set so commanding that Les McCann didn't just dig the performance, he was spiritually floored.
That's right, Soul Fam. The room was completely packed, and she delivered a performance that put a massive spike in those emotional meters.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, unbelievable. In Les's own words, she didn't just sing, she shattered the standard template. But because it was a festival-style benefit, setting with multiple moving parts, well, Les wanted to audit her in her natural habitat. So he needed to see if she could actually repeat that performance. All right, so Les marched his ass straight over to her headquarters at Mr. Henry's to catch her second set on her home turf. To see if this girl really had it, right? That's what he wanted to do.
Exactly.
So Mello, he sat upstairs in the church pew seating of the Roberta Flack room and watched her run a full 3-set night shift entirely on her own terms. And that second visit was the exact moment the master inspector signed off on the blueprint. Seeing her handle a crowded, rowdy bar with total operatic discipline and classical authority is what completely broke him. That night, he knew it wasn't just a one-time fluke at the Caverns. He realized she was an unshakable institution. And get this, Mello, he was so thoroughly convinced after that second look that he bypassed the standard submission channels, made a rogue demo tape, and used his heavy Atlantic Records capital to execute the corporate raid the very next week. He had to be 100% sure, and Mr. Henry's gave him that confirmation. Les McCann wasn't just a world-class showman. He was an artist of supreme integrity who wasn't afraid to use his massive star capital to break down corporate industry doors for other independent creators.
And she was such a fresh, explosive powerhouse.
She was so hardcore. It was unreal.
Yeah, and he was so impressed.
He was.
That is exactly where the ultimate behind-the-scenes architect steps into play.
And that's the cat.
The powerhouse jazz pianist and recording artist that Les McCann was, and we always talk about this, Soul Fam, every massive construction project. Yeah, it needs that first master inspector to validate that foundation. And Les was the general contractor who cracked the safe for Roberta. He walked into that upstairs room at Mr. Henry's one night and sat down, and his acoustic meters were completely floored.
Man, he didn't just leave a tip and catch a cab back to his hotel either, Mello. Les McCann was already a highly respected developer within the Atlantic Records framework. So compelled to get her noticed, Les immediately became her champion. He made a demo tape of her music, as we said before, took it directly to Atlantic Records, and arranged an audition with producer Joel Dorn. Atlantic was convinced. They sent an official scout to watch her play her regular set at Mr. Henry's, and, well, they signed her on the spot. It was purely a case of one master musician recognizing another and refusing to let the talent go unheard. He flew straight to New York and marched right into the executive suites of Atlantic. Now, you got to remember, Soul Fam, the record business at the time was an absolute boys' club, completely skeptical of signing an independent, classically trained school teacher who refused to perform standard radio-friendly commercial pop. Well, what do you think? So, Mello, let's audit how Roberta finally broke through the major New York label zoning laws, because early on, man, she was completely invisible to the mainstream marketplace. The music scene at large back then was heavily zoned for high-tempo, high-energy tracks, leaving zero space for Roberta's spacious, slow-crawling, classical folk soul fusions.
But McCann used his own artistic capital as an unbroken structural shield. He practically demanded that the label executives open up their floor plan and give her an audition. He set up a frame-accurate 3-hour studio tracking session where Roberta laid down a staggering 42 songs back-to-back.
Take that.
Okay? Completely leveling the production team with her absolute technical literacy. Thanks to McCann's relentless push, Atlantic signed her, paving the way for her 1969 debut album, First Take.
Yes, and her performance moved him so deeply that he wrote in the liner notes of that record, her voice touched, tapped, trapped, and kicked every emotion I've ever known. I laughed, cried, and screamed for more. That's a pretty deep thing to write on someone's record. But now, look at the next hurdle on the ledger, Mello. When First Take dropped, well, the commercial floor failed completely. Pop radio programmers, they didn't have any idea how to index it. They wanted loud, driving numbers, and Roberta's record was filled with spacious, slow-moving arrangements that corporate execs thought would stall out in the market. And the master tapes, well, they sat dead in the vault for nearly 3 full years.
But here's the major lesson for modern independent artists navigating a completely different algorithm-driven music scene today.
Gotta believe it.
Yeah, Roberta didn't cave to the label pressure to redesign her sound. She stood her ground and trusted her original blueprint.
Badass.
That stubborn structural integrity paid off massively when Clint Eastwood heard the deep acoustic space of The First Time I Ever Saw Your Face while driving.
Yeah, he bypassed the standard label promotional channels entirely. He pulled that 3-year-old track out of the vault for his psychological thriller, Play Misty for Me, and drove it straight to a number one massive global crossover smash. It shows every creator today that when your materials are high integrity, your timeline will eventually sync up with the world. Stick around, because up next we're auditing the greatest dual vocal engine partnership in the history of soul.
You're hanging with Max and Mello's Architects of Soul, so don't go nowhere.
Hey, we're back on the job site for segment 3, and it's time to deconstruct the Howard University years. The Howard University connection between Donny Hathaway and Roberta Flack is legendary. It's essentially the foundation of one of the greatest vocal pairings in music history. Roberta was a prodigy, entering Howard on a full scholarship at just 15, graduating with a degree in music education. And Donny, well, he arrived a bit later, also on a fine arts scholarship, majoring in music theory.
While Roberta's time at Howard slightly predated Donny's, their worlds absolutely overlapped on the Washington, D.C. music circuit, Max. Like I told you, Donny also played Mr. Henry's when he was at Howard. They ran...
Just that whole little cycle in the state.
Yeah. They ran in the same ultra-talented circles of young black classical and jazz musicians who were redefining the city's sound. Even before they recorded a single note together as duet partners, Roberta knew exactly who Donny was and deeply respected his genius. On that 1969 debut album, First Take, and 1970's Chapter 2, she was already covering and recording compositions that Donny had a hand in, even bringing him in to play piano and arrange.
That's right. And so, Mello, by 1971, both were signed to the Atlantic roster. Donny under the Aqua subsidiary and Roberta under the Atlantic aegis. Mm-hmm. Both had massive critical acclaim.
Oh, massive.
Massive. But our boy, the amazing Atlantic executive Jerry Wexler.
There he is again.
Check him out in our Atlantic Sound podcast, Season 1, Episode 16 and 17, y'all. That's right. Well, Jerry noticed there was something missing. They hadn't broken through to the massive commercial crossover audiences they deserved. Mm-hmm. And Wex, well, being the fucking genius that he was, he had a vision to pair them up, thinking, hey, a joint project could consolidate their fan bases and elevate both of their profiles. So when they reconnected in the studio in New York, man, the chemistry wasn't just professional. It was like immediate, organic, and deeply rooted in that shared Howard classical and gospel foundation. Man, they didn't just sing together. They anticipated each other's phrases.
Beautifully.
Mello, man, it was unreal. They understood the pocket on a genetic level. Donny brought those dense symphonic gospel-inflected chord structures, and Roberta brought that pristine, spacious, emotionally devastating control.
Yes, sir, Soul Fam. That reconnect gave us their self-titled 1972 duets album, yielding masterpieces like Where's the Love?
Which I love.
And Be Real Black for Me. It wasn't just a label-engineered pairing. It was a reunion of two old-school musical soulmates who spoke the exact same dialect. And Max, they weren't just singing standard duets. They were weaving intricate counter melodies like twin classical instruments.
It was a beautiful sound, boy.
Man, the sonic alignment on those tracking passes was completely magnificent.
Word.
Take a skyscraper hit like Where's the Love in 1972. The track wasn't even originally engineered for their ledger. It was written by Ralph McDonald and Bill Salter, and it was intended for Fifth Dimension members Marilyn McCoo and Billy Davis.
Yeah, and
Jr.
What did they do?
They passed on it. Can you believe that?
It? No.
When they passed, it landed in the hands of producers Joel Dorn and my man Arif Mardin.
Arif.
You've heard about it in the Atlantic.
Same thing.
You're going to hear Arif's name a lot because he produced everybody. And then straight to the hands of Roberta and Donny. Roberta saw the blueprint, recognized the spiritual potential, grabbed Donny, and turned it into an absolute master class in light, breezy, yet structurally flawless pop soul.
In the session, Mello, well, it was an absolute master class in effortless organic synergy. They tracked their vocals simultaneously, facing each other in the studio. They didn't punch in their harmonies line by line. Man, they sang it down together. Donny's warm, church-inflected tenor and Roberta's pristine classical control locked in so tightly that their phrasing became mirrors of one another. And Mello, Donny's contribution went way beyond singing. Sitting at the Rhodes, he anchored the groove with a deceptive, understated simplicity. And while the musicians from the Atlantic session circuit often noted that recording with Donny and Roberta felt less like a job and more like Sunday morning gatherings, man, there's no competing for the spotlight. The mutual respect was so high that they inherently knew when to lean in and when to give each other room to breathe.
Well, Soul Fam, as we know, that track was an instant smash, winning them a Grammy for Best Pop Performance by a Duo or Group.
Holla.
Yeah, but as their joint star soared, Donny's mental health battles with severe paranoid schizophrenic began to take a heavy toll, distancing him from the industry and from Roberta for several years.
Yes, Mello. And as we talked about in last season's Donny Hathaway, Amy Winehouse, Season 1, Episode 19, y'all. Donny began exhibiting extreme paranoia, expressing fears that white people were trying to kill him and had connected his brain to a machine for the purpose of stealing his music and his voice. So by the late 1970s, Roberta was determined to help her friend heal through the one thing that they shared completely, music. After a successful reunion on The Closer I Get to You in 1977, which was originally supposed to be a duet, but Donny's illness meant his parts had to be tracked separately later. He was suffering. They officially went into the studio in late 1978 to record a full second duets album. The label executives, well, they were starting to view his unpredictable shifts as a severe corporate liability, and they wanted to pull the plug on the entire project to protect their financial margins, of course, as businessmen. But Roberta, she was a badass because she flatly refused to let them abandon the scaffolding, Mello. She used her massive newly acquired star capital to act as an unbroken shield, protecting Donny from the corporate suite and turning the studio floor into a total acoustic sanctuary. Man, if Donny could only handle 30 minutes of tracking a day, well, Roberta would wait for hours, keeping the session musicians in the pocket until his frequency aligned.
The sessions for Back Together Again, Max, written by James Ntume and Reggie Lucas, carried an entirely different energy, though. Music was changing. The industry was leaning heavily into upscale, sophisticated disco and uptempo R&B. Ntume and Lucas laid down a brilliant driving rhythm track featuring Anthony Jackson's iconic bubbling bass line. The atmosphere in the studio was charged with emotion. The title of the song wasn't just a lyric, it was a literal celebration. When Donny stepped up to the mic, despite the immense personal struggles he was enduring outside of the studio, that impeccable pitch, vocal control, and innate gospel soul were completely intact.
And the session featured an incredible lineup of vocalists on backups, including a young Luther Vandross and Gwen Guthrie, all there to support the return of the Masters. But the musicians reported that while Donny was singing beautifully, his mental state was deteriorating. So they stopped the session, and they reportedly ended it early due to Donny's exhibiting this irrational or delusional behavior. And tragically, well, the promise of that album was never fully realized. And on January 13th, 1979, during a break in the recording schedule, Donny passed away after a fall from his 15th floor room at the Essex House Hotel in New York. Roberta was utterly devastated, and the project was put on hold, but she eventually went back into the studio to finish the record using the vocals Donny had already completed.
Now that is what keeping the teamwork high and the ego low actually looks like in practice, family. She created a safe space for his genius to breathe. And when he tragically passed away in 1979 during the tracking of their final album, Roberta Flack featuring Donny Hathaway, a devastated Roberta didn't just liquidate the assets.
No, she did not.
No, she faced down her deep personal grief, stepped back onto the tracking floor, completed the construction, and spent decades aggressively patrolling the music business to make sure Donny's estate and legacy were permanently protected. Released in 1980, Max, Back Together Again became a massive poignant hit, a celebratory, danceable masterpiece that stands as a beautiful final testament to the brotherhood and musical connection that couldn't be broken, even by tragedy.
Exactly, no.
And you know that song is a cookout classic now.
It's a cookout classic. It is.
Back Together Again, yeah.
So this is a massive lesson for upcoming R&B and soul artists working in today's highly isolated digital music scene. Seriously, and y'all need to listen to this. Back then, it was about real human solidarity, building a protective framework around your creative partners when the storm hits the job site. You don't abandon the build just because the pillar is under stress. You reinforce the frame, right? We all stick together. We all help each other. We all rise together. Because support is everything, especially in this industry. Just to reinforce our frame, we're going to take another quick break. And when we come back for segment 4, we're breaking down how Roberta built a secret identity to completely take over the control room. Stay tuned, Soul FM.
Stick around.
Thanks for tuning in to Architects of Soul. Our music is waiting for you.
Welcome back to Architects of Soul. We're stepping into segment 4, and before we dive back into the world of Roberta Flack, if you like this content, please give a like and subscribe to our channel.
Please.
Yeah, and remember, there is a video version available on our YouTube page if you feel like watching instead of just listening. So, Max, we have to emphasize her incredible business literacy right here, because the 1970s control room glass was an absolute boys' club. But we have to go back to Roberta's youth.
That's right. As a kid practicing classical piano, Roberta would log hours doing rigid, grueling finger exercises, Soul Fam. And whenever she got tired or frustrated, she would imagine her alter ego, Rubina Flake, effortlessly tearing through complex Chopin concertos with total glamour and flair. It was her childhood escape, a secondary musical soul where she had no limitations. And decades later, in 1974, well, that childhood daydream became a necessary shield in the music business. Rubina Flake returns to protect Roberta. So during the recording of the fifth album, Feel Like Making Love, her longtime producer Joel Dorn stepped away from the project. So rather than letting Atlantic hire another outside producer to dictate her sound, Roberta made the bold decision to produce the record herself. Now, at the time, the music industry was heavily dominated by men, as we said. It was incredibly rare for a black woman to be credited as a sole producer. It was a total executive monopoly.
Exactly.
They weren't giving shit. Label heads routinely paired female soul vocalists with heavy-handed male producers who tried to dictate the tempo, the instrumentation, and the overall sonic volume of the project. Not for Roberta. Because Roberta possessed way too much classical math to let anyone override her technical blueprints. And to completely bypass that institutional skepticism, she began secretly self-producing her own tracks under the brilliant shadow pseudonym Rubina Flake, making a safe space for Roberta.
Yes, Max. Facing massive industry pushback and skepticism about her ability to run a mixing board, arrange, and manage a studio budget, Roberta summoned the fearless confidence of her childhood alter ego. So when the Feel Like Making Love LP dropped in 1975, the liner notes officially credited Rubina Flake for keyboards, background vocals, and production. Using that name allowed Roberta to separate her identity as the polite, classically trained performer from the powerhouse executive calling the shots in a room full of suits. Rubina Flake was the version of her that didn't care about anyone else's restrictions, and it resulted in one of her absolute greatest self-produced masterpieces.
Yeah, she was literally acting as the undercover general contractor on her own multi-platinum sessions. She gave the final engineering sign-offs and structural directions, and by the time the corporate suits realized that this flawless, award-winning sonic infrastructure was entirely designed by Roberta herself, she'd completely broken the glass ceiling for female music business literacy. This is how you claim the deed to your own art, y'all. Serious specs. She rewrote the code entirely. She made music industry history by becoming the first artist ever to win the Grammy Award for Record of the Year in 2 consecutive years. In 1973 for First Time Ever I Saw Your Face, and in 1974 for Killing Me Softly with His Song. And the blueprint for Killing Me Softly, it was pure artistic innovation. And in 1972, while on a transcontinental flight, she listened to an obscure version of the track by Laurie Lieberman. She instantly recognized the global structural potential, grabbed a yellow legal pad right there in her seat, and sketched out a brand new layout featuring a heavy syncopated R&B bass line and a classical vocal lift, recording it the second she landed.
She knew how to scale a simple folk frame into a panoramic masterpiece, Max. And look how she applied that master builder philosophy into mentoring the next generation. In the mid-1970s, she heard a young, unknown background singer named Luther Vandross. Now, before Luther Vandross was Luther, he was the most sought-after session and background singer in New York City. He'd worked with David Bowie and on jingles. But his time singing background for Roberta Flack is where the real magic and one of the best stories in R&B history happened.
Truly. And it's true. Luther started singing backup for Roberta on the road and in the studio during the mid to late 70s, recognizing his pristine vocal architecture. And that guy could fucking sing. She didn't view him as a threat to her marquee, though. She hired him for her touring band, paid him a massive salary to ensure his financial stability, and deliberately stepped back on stage to give him solo spotlights. Man, if you look closely at the credits for her 1978 self-titled debut album, which, of course, Rubina Flake produced, Luther is right there in the liner notes, laying down vocal textures right alongside Gwen Guthrie, as we mentioned earlier. The absolute best part of their story, though, is how their professional relationship officially ended. Because Luther's vocal ability and his musical ear was so massive, he became Roberta's de facto stand-in during tour rehearsals. So since Roberta was a big star, often had to do press or radio interviews during sound checks, while she was away, Luther would step up to her lead microphone to sing her parts so the crew could balance the house sound and check the lighting directors, check the cues in the show. I mean, can you just imagine?
Yeah.
One day during a sound check at the theater, the house lights were completely dimmed. Luther was on the stage, front and center, completely lost in the music, belting out her biggest hits, Killing Me Softly and The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face. I can only think that must have been phenomenal. And then put his whole heart and soul into everything he ever did, every time he sang. You can just imagine what he was doing.
Well, suddenly, though, the house lights came up.
Like, uh-oh.
Roberta had quietly slipped back into the venue and was sitting in the empty audience watching him. She walked down the aisle, looked right at him, and said, you're getting a little too comfortable sitting on that stool in the background singing oohs and ahs. I really want you to make your own statement and make your own record. Luther always loved to tell the story by saying, in effect, she fired me.
Yes, she fired me.
Right. Whenever Roberta was asked about it later, she'd laugh and correct the record. Luther likes to say that I fired him, but I never really fired him. What I did was to encourage him to believe in his own ability to produce his first album.
That's right. She forced him out of the nest because she knew that keeping a voice like that in the background was a crime against music and humanity, if you ask me. Luther took that push, saved up the money he made working session gigs and touring with her, and he used it to fund the recording of his solo debut. In 1981, he dropped Never Too Much. And boy, it was definitely never too much. It's unbelievable.
It's still a classic now.
It's still a classic.
Yeah.
And the rest, of course, we know is history. It's just another testament to Roberta's incredible ear. Just like Les McCann recognized her genius and wouldn't let it sit in a DC nightclub, Roberta recognized Luther's and refused to let him hide behind her spotlight. She literally engineered the structural launching pad that Luther needed to scale his own multi-platinum solo career. She taught every artist that the true power comes from sharing your platform and nurturing the upcoming talent in the room. So we're heading into our final wrap-up of the day, so keep your dials locked right here to this frequency, and we'll be back to put a bow on this puppy.
You're listening to Max and Mello's Architects of Soul, so stay with us, y'all.
We're back for the final inspection on today's job site. So Mello, when you look at the total historical trajectory of Roberta Flack's journey, it stands as the ultimate operational manual on quiet fire, technical precision, and creative resilience for artists today.
It really does, Max. She proved to every upcoming creator in R&B and soul that you can hold total creative control over your architectural legacy if your foundation is anchored deep enough in music literacy and business authority. She had a remarkably long and enduring career. While she suffered a stroke in 2018 that limited her public appearances, she continued to be musically active.
And even after she could no longer physically play or perform Mello, in 2022, when her team had announced that she was battling ALS, which made it physically impossible for her to sing, she didn't let that limitation silence her impact. True to the blueprint of a wise mentor, she simply shifted her scaffolding towards film, television, and children's literacy programs. She oversaw the release of a feature documentary about her life called, interestingly enough, Roberta, in late 2022, and publishing a children's book about her musical beginnings, that's also, interestingly enough, called The Green Piano, right, in 2023.
Yeah, her structural foundation remains completely untouched and unbroken. Max, are we emphasizing this entire journey on the feedback floor today? Because the upcoming artists in today's scene need to understand that being a true creator means being the general contractor of your own life and your own business.
Big heat, soul fam.
That is the final quality check for today. Protect your sound, own your voice, and always protect your master recording.
That's right, Mel. Pack up your tools to protect your production team and keep the teamwork high. And as always, we want to close with our final thought and a hope for all of us, our art, our craft, and our creations.
Keep that soul fire burning, protect your sound, nurture your creativity, own your voice, and remember the lessons from the giants who came before.
And yes, protect your masters and seek out wise mentors who can guide you on your journey. And until next we meet, peace and soul, y'all.